Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Not Your Average Joel. So, we are actually on episode 38 today, and so far, season two has been going great. I've been having past guests on here, coming back onto my channel. I've also had some new guests that have shown up on my channel as well. So, I'm glad to have anybody and everybody from every age and stage of life on here. And speaking of past guests, we actually have a past guest back here with us. This is Madison. This is her second time here. The first time she was on here was on the episode about parenthood. Me and Madison, as well as our fellow classmate Adrian, we had a very good conversation about parenthood. Even though I'm not a parent, but both Madison and Adrian are, and they both like kind of talked about their experiences about being a new parent and maybe some struggles that come with that and things that they're even still learning to this day. Definitely a learning experience just each and every day, even as their babies and their children get older. So definitely, if you haven't checked that episode out, please be sure to go check that out. So, anyways, I'm glad to have you back. So, welcome back.
Yay, I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, it's definitely good to have you. And today is going to be a very good conversation today because this is a topic that definitely I can relate to personally. And I definitely wanted to talk to another fellow Christian about this. And I'm glad to have Madison on here because today's topic is actually going to be about religion versus relationship. So, if you asked me this probably when I was a teenager, what was the difference? I probably wouldn't be able to give you the answer because I was, I guess, very young in my faith. I mean, young literally, and then also young in my faith to where I didn't take my faith as seriously until I got older, probably once I got into college. So, but now I do know the difference between these two, and I actually have a few questions that I want to ask Madison. And of course, I'm going to give my feedback as well regarding these questions. So we are actually going to go ahead and get into this first question. So, my first question is, what is the difference between having religion and having a relationship with Jesus Christ?
So when we talk about religion, we can almost get kind of like can't think of the word. Hang on a sec. Legalistic. That's the word. So we can get kind of legalistic. We can start thinking legalistically like, okay, if I pray this many times in a day, then I'll be saved, I'll be good. Or if I do this good deed or that good deed, then I'm saved and I'll be good. And if we read in the Old Testament or the New Testament, sorry, if we read in the New Testament with the Pharisees, they thought in that way and they knew the law of God like the back of their hand. They could recite it word for word. They knew it in their minds. But then when Jesus Christ came to earth and he stood right in front of them, they missed it. They didn't even realize that that was God in the flesh, and they missed the whole picture. And so religion is thinking in that way, and it's almost a self-righteousness. Like if we think in any form or fashion that we can save ourselves by doing X, Y, or Z, then that's taking the glory away from God and putting it on ourselves. And there's no way that we can be saved on our own. And that's why Jesus Christ came to this earth and died on a cross for our sins, is because he knew from the beginning that we would never be able to save ourselves. And Jesus Christ desires that relationship with us. Like he knows our heart and he formed our heart, and like he desires us to know him and to spend time with him and to develop a relationship with him personally. Like that's what he desires. And don't get me wrong, I say, if we obey, if we do all these different things of obedience, then that's the legalistic part of thinking that we can save ourselves. But we are also supposed to obey God, but not because we think that we can obtain anything by it, but because we love God so much and because he loves us so much. So we obey God not out of trying to obtain something, but we obey God out of the love that he has for us and us loving him back. And that's where our obedience to Christ comes from, is out of love and not out of a self-righteous attitude.
Yeah, yeah, that is a very good answer. I definitely, when you brought up legalistic, I automatically started thinking about the Pharisees as well, because like you said, they, know the Bible front to back, the Old Testament, they know it front to back, they know all about it. And then here it comes, the coming Messiah, and it's right there in front of them. They were expecting a king like,
Mm-hmm.
person, and here comes Jesus, the complete opposite, born in a manger. Not no, he didn't come from, some, higher up, level of things. He was just there along with the rest of the people. He was with, Joseph was a carpenter, and all of that. So I said, just it just goes to show that, they had a different picture of what the Messiah was going to be. And then here comes Jesus, and they of course ignored all of that. Or no, well, they didn't ignore it, they started going against him, and of course led to his crucifixion, and them fulfilling prophecy that they didn't realize that they were fulfilling, but they fulfilled. So
I
um
watched the Chosen. I've been watching that, the season 2, and in that, the one I was on recently, it was talking about, do you remember the story in the Bible where the man, he was paralyzed from a young age, and everyone was at this like well, and when the water started getting mixed up, that's when everyone that was like paralyzed, or everyone that was having like some kind of illness, would rush to the water, and the first one to reach that like bubbling water would be essentially like healed of their disease or illness. Well, he was there for so long and he could never get in because, he had no one to help him into the water, and everyone would go before him. Jesus Christ literally came to him on the Sabbath and healed him. So get up your mat and walk. Like, you're free. You can walk, sin no more. And then the Pharisees, being all self righteous, came in and they're like, he just healed a man on the Sabbath. And it's like he just performed a miracle. Like, this man that could not walk is now walking again. Like, the legalistic part of like it being on the Sabbath, like, it's Jesus and he's healing people. Like, that's a miracle.
Yes, exactly. That's yeah, that is, crazy that their focus was more on, yeah, the following the rules, basically, when Jesus was there fulfilling these kind of prophecies that was told thousands of years ago. But here they are, more worried about it being on a Sabbath than anything. And like you said, it goes back to the idea of being like self-righteousness. And even just thinking about in the Bible about the story about the Pharisee going to pray and talking about, I'm glad I'm not like this person over here. And they're talking about all the things they do and all the things they do for God. But then here is the tax collector, can't even look up because he's like so ashamed, knows that he's a sinner. And it just goes back to a lot of pride, and it goes back to, just showing how humble we should be when it comes to our relationship, with Jesus. I think that's where it all just goes back to, because religion does it just goes it doesn't really go a long way when you just think about, without Jesus, it definitely does not go far at all. It just kind of goes back to you making yourself I guess more of a little g god in a way, just trying to make yourself look better than other people on the outside, when on the inside it's rotten. Basically, it's just kind of not, there's no growth there. It's just making it all about you. And then I know I've heard this before in church, but like a quote that I've always heard is, if you think the world surrounds you, then like you live in a pretty small world. Because it definitely stands true. And I think just even, people like to focus, even nowadays, people like to focus on the idea of calling themselves Christians, just to have that label, and thinking that label is going to take them to heaven. That's like, okay, well, I say I'm a Christian, so I'm going to heaven no matter what. No matter what I do here on earth,
Mhm.
And even with Christians, I feel like it can be, especially here in the Bible Belt, I feel like it could be very, just kind of you fall into that a pattern of just going to church on Sundays and Wednesdays, and make sure you pray, make sure you read the Bible, and or if tithing or don't tithe, it just
It's
depends
more
on.
of a checklist than it is like a relationship at that point. Like it's a matter of our hearts. Like, something I've heard not so much as a child, but more in my adulthood, like you said, is it's a matter of our hearts. Like, what is the motive of our hearts? We can always check ourselves and think, okay, what is the reasoning behind what I'm doing? Like, why am I doing this thing? Why am I going to church? Why am I reading the Bible? Is it to say that I did it? Because that's right there. If that's a red flag. If you're just saying, okay, I went to church just to say I went to church, that's a red flag right there that your heart's not in the right spot. And so that's another form of, religion, is having a checklist instead of, like, our motive for going to church should be to gain that relationship with Christ and to spend time with his people, serving his people and loving his people and loving him. And that should be, and worshiping him. And that should be our goal for church, more so than just saying, okay, well, I went to church today. I did my thing for the week.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good point. That a lot of people do make it out to be like a checklist, and then that almost becomes more of like a work-based salvation, which of course we're not saved by works, but of course we know when we're saved, that like those works kind of come out from our heart, but we're not doing these works out of, trying to impress God for bonus points, basically. We're not telling God, look, I donated to this charity,
Yeah.
trying to make it seem like God doesn't know already that we're doing that
Yeah.
stuff. So,
And see,
just
we're very, like, I'm speaking to myself here too. Like, we are very, very prideful people. Like, just that's just our human nature. And so I think that we all have some form of pride in us. Some are, bigger than others. And it's also very difficult for an individual to see pride in their own self. And so, we are all sinners. And so, like, we talk about this legalistic view versus and religion versus, like, a relationship with Christ. And, like, yes, I have a relationship with Christ, but that doesn't mean that, like, I haven't had moments of legalism or religion. Because, like, in my own personal life, there's been moments where, like, I have thought, okay, well, I need to do this now, and I need to do this now so God can see me do it. And, like, again, it goes back to a motive of the heart, and, like, the Holy Spirit convicts me of that. And then I'm like, and conviction is a good thing. And so it gets you back on the right track. And so then I'm able to be like, okay, God, like, I am so sorry for thinking in that way. So, like, I can't say that I've never been in the position of thinking like that, because, I too have been there. And, because the Holy Spirit convicted me of it, like, I know I know when I'm in that spot and when I'm not in that spot, because I can check myself and check my heart.
yeah, that's definitely good to like have a heart check when it comes to those moments, because I could even admit as well on my end that I've definitely had those legalistic kind of attitude, that kind of prideful moment where I feel like I'm almost doing something out of a personal gain, or like out of trying to gain attention to, like, look what I'm doing. Like, I'm doing
Mhm.
something really good over here. Like, even another thing that can be something like prideful that I'm just thinking of, like an example, is that like I don't use language, like I don't really use profanity. And I but then sometimes I'll kind of, I guess, brag about it sometimes, or sometimes I'll even brag about, like, oh, like I don't smoke, I've never done drugs in my life, but that's just because it's never been a struggle. Everybody has a different sin that they struggle with, and some of it can be from, like, I guess, generational curses, and so it's definitely a different struggle. But there are times where, I may be like, oh, I don't know why anybody would ever do this. Like, I've never had this, the urge to take drugs or do something like this. So it definitely just goes back to kind of having that legalistic, that prideful, or modern day Pharisee attitude, basically, of thinking, like and that's kind of where Christians can kind of look bad sometimes, because then we kind of have the holier than thou, kind of attitude, where it looks like we're looking down upon people, even if that's not our intent. But I can see how it comes off like that, towards other people, because they may look at it, thinking like, wow, like this person is gonna, condemn me just because I, smoke cigarettes, and it's hard for me to quit smoking cigarettes or something like that. So it's just definitely a lot of it comes from stems from our heart, and then it, of course, comes out to our attitude, depending on, or of course, things that come from our mind as well. So a lot of it just comes to pride, for sure.